Okay, so try to keep this as concise as I possibly can. There's a lot of stuff that I want to go over, but I'll try to stick to the most relevant stuff so we don't get bogged down in getting into the weeds and the details. But what I definitely want to cover is essentially these topics that you see here on the screen. What we have, essentially what's working for the project, what things have been tested and proven to work, because there's some things that are still speculative. We're waiting to hear back, things like that. But I want to talk about what things we have working, going for us right now, what things we still need, still things that, you know, we figure more requirements for the project, but we don't necessarily have solutions for just yet. Talk about that. We'll talk about the positions that we can consolidate to save us a little bit of money on our budget. I know that we're at 100,000, and given the different parameters that I discussed previously, I know we'd be way over budget. So we can talk about that. Talk about some resources that we may still need. Talk a little bit about a general timeline for how quickly we can get this done, and we'll talk about costs, some cost cutting measures that we might be able to take care of. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to give a little bit of a demonstration as to the things that we have working, so that you can see that they work practically. Of those things, we have cross-platform compatibility. I've been able to do builds for Windows or UWP and Android so far. I've been able to do those two. I haven't built to iOS. I don't right now have any emulators that are working for iOS, so I figured it's probably not too practical to build out, since I won't be able to test it, but we'll work with the team to get some of that done. We have social interaction is working. You'll see now when we start up in the demo, I'll jump in and I have it running on my emulator, my Android emulator, and on the Oculus right now. And then I'll jump in with the phone so you can see, kind of how those interactions work. And then we'll talk about multimedia hosting, which, given the PHP server that we have right now, is totally feasible. I haven't tested it out just yet because I haven't built a framework to store the repository or store within a repository inside the project, but we're essentially just pulling data from the PHP server, which, by the way, is my personal website's PHP server. So this is a very malleable script in the sense that it'll work with essentially any PHP server. And mine isn't even dedicated to that, but you can use it. And it has unlimited storage, but we'll get into all that. So without further ado, I'm going to bring up, let's see here. I'm going to bring up BlueStacks. BlueStacks is an emulator for Android devices. Right now, I think I'm running this on what would essentially be a tablet. I think it's like the Xperia or something like that. So I'm going to hop in here. Bear with me. I just have to start the recording on here. Oh, I have to start the recording on here. Now try to keep everything as real time as possible. Now I'm running OBS on my computer, and I'm running Unity, so it's going to be running a little bit slower. And I also have Google Chrome open, so I can show you how the files will populate inside our online PHP server. So it's going to be running a little bit slower than usual, but I still want to kind of show you general time frames that we'd be working with here. And actually, now I have to go back in because it looks like this stopped when I put the headset down. Just a second. Okay, now I'm going to start the recording for this. Okay, check. Okay. So now I'm in VR. I just joined the other player that you can see here on the screen. I'm going to try to get front here. You can see, should be able to see me waving here. Yep. A little bit slow on the computer, but as I said, I'm running a bunch of stuff, so. Great, so now we can see that we have social interaction, and I think it should work. I don't know how great you'll be able to hear it, but you can also hear from the microphone here and on the computer on each device. It might sound a bit like an echo. Check, check. Check, check. You probably can't hear that. But that works. And now we'll show the social sharing element. Now, a good thing about this is the sharing elements within the game, they load in real time, so you'll be able to see it. There's a little bit of delay here because of my network settings, but whatever I can see, the person can see, and it's uploaded onto the server for them to access at any time. So I'll just pull this up. And just like VR chat, if you've ever used it, it has the same, you hold the virtual tablet and you can access all of the settings, the room, the players, you can change your name, height, and things like that. Of course, we can add much more to this. This is just the template that came with the Unity asset. So click that, and then I'll pull up our old video. And you can see down here there's a progress bar showing the progress of the upload. After it does this, then it has to process the video, and that's going to take about another few minutes. But I'll add timestamps to skip ahead. But I just wanted to leave this open so you can see about how long it would take. This also lends a little bit of credence to the thoughts and discussion we had before about needing a video encoding engineer, somebody who can go in and use different resources, repositories, coding, what have you, to make this process much faster. You can see with HeadJack, these upload and download times are much faster, and they're dealing with 4K, 8K, 3D video. All of the video that we have here is simply going on to geometry inside the IDE inside of Unity. And as you can see, it's processing MP4 now. Which is great, because if it's on a surface like this, we can just add it to a 360 sphere and essentially have 3D video. That, along with teleporting, which comes standard with the Oculus integration, we'll be able to have 3D video, have 180 video, essentially any type of XR media that we want. And you can see it's going here, and I'm just going to hop back over to the computer, and just move up just a little bit so we can see. Running super slow now. Apologize about that. And you can see the video playing there as it's playing for me on my screen. Pretty cool. Okay, and I would reach out and grab, at this geometry here, you can just grab. If I wanted to, if I was in VR and another headset, I would also be able to reach out and grab, any other player would be able to reach out and grab this geometry as well. But they have another cool feature, which is, you can transport media, which is really, really, really cool. If we have presentations or things like, or if users have presentations, things like that, and they want to transfer media, you can do it, almost seamlessly. And that's different. Surprised it's not showing on there. It might still be buffering, but yeah. So there's that social element. Okay. And another thing, I'll just put this here for a second. Uh, so this is my entire directory for my website, and I simply added a folder, a couple folders here, to my public HTML folder, which is a folder that's accessible through URL. And in that folder, I simply, after the video is done processing from my device, it'll upload it here. So what I'll do now is I will go ahead and, probably should have done this before, I'll delete this, and then I'll reload the video. So I need to go in here and stop it, and I'll reload the video, and you'll see that it'll populate inside the folder here. I'm still trying to get it to work to pull from the server. I've been able to get it to work before, but I started testing some different platforms and configurations, and it's kind of been a little bit wonky, but worst comes to worst, I can just reboot the original version of the project and show you how we can pull data directly from the server. But see, okay, so now that information is gone, and you can see here on the desktop, it's, the directory is empty. Just refresh this a couple times. Okay, and I'm going to upload the video again. Might fast forward this one. But it's essentially the same. We'd be able to upload any type of media. As long as we get the extensions correct on it, it shouldn't be that much of a problem. I've been working with the developer of this environment, and I'll CC everyone in that email thread so you can see. I've had a few slight issues with compatibility and devices, but hopefully they'll be able to get that squared away. I haven't heard back from the developer or owner of this yet, but I assume that he should be able to help now, because these issues aren't terribly technical. Really, him helping out would just expedite us getting this done. If not, I should be able to figure it out as well. Okay, let's back up. Process the MP4. And of course, the models, everything like that. I mean, anyone with knowledge of building out geometry should be able to substitute those in. I'll try to have demos for all of that as well as soon as possible. So now that's back up, which means that it should be, well, I mean, it has to be back on. Yep, right here. See, it'll save it to the PHP server. And I've spoken with the customer service help with HostGator, which is what I'm using, and cPanel, and they said that there's limitless storage. There's no cap. There's no payment barrier. So that would also save the team a little bit of money and frustration not having to deal with that. But we definitely would need a video encoding engineer for that. Okay, so I'll let that play out. And then I'm going to actually stop this on, I'm going to stop BlueStacks, and I'm going to start, so I'm going to exit out of here. And I'm going to start it on my phone so you can see it working on a mobile device. Now, I tried to get like SideSync to work, and there's some other like AirDroid and things like that to work on my phone. I mean, my phone might be a little bit too old, but they wouldn't work. So I just have my camera set up. So I'm going to start that up and show you the compatibility for the devices. Well, at least for a Android device. Might take a second to load up here. I'll start the recording for this. Okay, so now I'm also on my Android device. Pick this back up. And you can see we have a new player here. That might be the old player. No, it's a new player. Okay. So I'm going to walk. And one of the other problems is that one of the other reasons that I need to speak with the developer of this is because I've tried several ways, but it keeps opening up Gear VR unless I completely disable any of the Android-specific parameters for the project, which kind of makes it useless because it's hard to run around, move around or interact. I mean, you really essentially can't do anything without the controls, but I am able to do it on my super old phone. I mean, the phone we're looking at now is a Galaxy S5, just an old phone. And I have a few. I have a Motorola. I've tried that out too as well. Essentially, any phone that came with Oculus built into the OS will instantiate the Gear VR or Oculus VR environment when you start the program up. But I feel like, with time, especially with dedicated engineers, you should be able to figure that out very, very quickly. So I'm in there, and just going to move around a little bit here. We'll turn my character around. So I wish there was like a stand for. Let's see if I can rotate him around while I do this. Okay. All right. Kind of touch it. Okay. You still see that? Okay, great. Now you can see our characters interacting. Oops. Okay. All right, so there's that. And, of course, on this device, you'll be able to, enter all the same functionality that you have with, get all the same functionality that you'd have with, using it on the Oculus. So yeah, so let's go back into the document. Okay, so we have cross-platform compatibility. It also shouldn't be terribly hard to get a web build of this, because I haven't seen any parts of the API that would make it, unable to be built on the web. Usually most applications that are built on Android can also be built on the web because there's no, Windows-specific APIs or functions. Java, JavaScript, they run great on web builds, so it shouldn't be a problem. All right, well, I think that should conclude the demonstration. I'm just going to go ahead and hop out of here. Stop that recording. Click this. And of course, I will absolutely update the documentation. This is just kind of like a read-along for the video. I'll add this to the documentation as well, but I'll update that so we can all be on the same page with some of the more detailed parts of this, in case you have any questions. Okay, so what do we need? We still need a marketplace. I know, Miles, I discussed this with you before. There are a ton of I just want to make sure I'm still recording. There's a ton of different marketplaces you can get from the Unity Asset Store. I might as well get one today and start testing it. I never considered it much of a priority because, as I said, I've done this with a dozen different projects, and having a regular marketplace, or as we discussed, Miles, having a the marketplace simply be online. I also have the infrastructure through my personal website to handle transactions. If we were maybe to put it in a cart in virtual reality or on the device, and then later on to go into the website and like finalize your purchases, that's also an option. I personally use Easy Digital Downloads. It works perfectly great, handle thousands of transactions. So yeah. Also, we may still want to consider using a third-party CMS. And, we're talking about consolidating roles. We wouldn't necessarily need a encoding engineer to, work on making our upload and downloads of the files more accessible to every user. But again, we need to hear back from HeadJack, and given the fact that we wanted to have this out, I think, by Q2, I think that makes it very, very important to just to still consider it. Hopefully, they get back to us sooner. I also want to see what other things we can learn and gain from HeadJack and possibly incorporate into the project. But it's also something we may want to consider. Also, wouldn't need to host our own PHP server. I know how to do that now, but might save us a little bit on overhead. And then iOS testing. I need to test for iOS. I have no iOS devices. As of yet, I haven't found any iOS emulators that will run on Windows 10, especially ones that are compatible with my system. Okay, and we're back. Okay. Yeah, the wife wasn't feeling good last night on her way back home, so I had to take a brief intermission. And by brief, I mean today's the next day. So nice and fresh. So let's pick right back up. So where I left off last time, I was talking about some of the positions and how some of those might overlap, so that we'll be able to consolidate them to save us a little bit of money on overhead payroll. Yeah, UX, UI designers, which are essentially the same. I mean, the UI designer is going to be somebody who's going to be really familiar with developing ergonomic interfaces, and the UX designer is going to be somebody that is going to really focus on the experience of the user experience. And a lot of times those go hand in hand, they go tandem. People who are good at UI tend to be good at UX, vice versa. But that position tends to overlap quite well with the back-end developers. I mean, anyone who has had to design the functionality of a useful UI and UX, especially through code, any of those designers may also be back-end developers as well. Back-end developers have an intimate knowledge of how the functions and methods can get UX and UI to work properly. So those skills tend to go hand in hand. And then, of course, the QA tester could be the person who has a professional working knowledge of UX and UI. So, these positions can go hand in hand. Someone who's good at this could be good at this. Someone who's good at back-end development, and vice versa. QA testers are usually people, in my experience, working with companies where they just have enough resources to allocate that position specifically so that they can save time. Deadlines are important on big builds, and depending on how big this project gets, that's something that we will have to make an executive decision about, or the team will have to make an executive decision about moving forward. Project managers and recruiters. The project manager also has a very should have a very holistic knowledge of what the project's going to need. Probably also have a lot of experience, especially with coding and development. And so that person, given that knowledge, would, obviously make for an excellent recruiter, since they'll be able to vet that position that much better because of their title and experience. Web developers and database engineers. Anyone who's a database engineer has had to do a little bit of web development. If they're working on any type of database that's over a network. And then, of course, a web developer, if, even myself, I didn't take any specific training for web development, but I've worked with databases, and that's kind of supplemented my knowledge about database engineering. But depending on the direction that we go, whether we use CMS or we host our own server, like a PHP server I showed you in the example earlier, it'll depend on whether or not how much overlap we can have. We may not need a database engineer, of course, like I said before, if we have a CMS system that we can get to incorporate into the project. But if we don't decide to go that route, these positions are possible candidates to be combined. Positions that would be a little bit harder to have overlap is, one of them, of course, is the video encoding engineer. This position is going to be a little bit more difficult because the skill set that's required. A lot of people that come from this position have a background in media as opposed to programming. Although anyone who's sufficiently knowledgeable about setting up this kind of infrastructure should have some coding knowledge, but it's a very even from what I've just tried to learn doing research on the project, it seems like it's a more it's a slightly more dedicated field of career field. And then, of course, 2D and 3D artists may not have any engineering positions, which may not work, may not have overlap. I do 2D and 3D, but then again, I have way, way, way too many hobbies, so that's something that would overlap for a person like myself. You may get lucky, but reaching out through resources like LinkedIn or Indeed or any of the other employment services online, it may be a little bit harder to find someone with that knowledge, especially with an educated or working experience in any fields that might be able to overlap. Okay, so resources. If we're going to test, if it's truly going to be cross-platform compatibility, eventually, whether you run iOS, Windows, or a Linux machine, running emulators and testing different devices is a great tool, but I've learned through experience that its practical application for testing doesn't always yield a conclusive result. That is to say, I could test it on an emulator on my machine, and it could run beautifully, but you go to test it on an actual device, and given that there's so many different iterations of and generations and specific build versions, especially when you get into iOS, that it may not actually work in the real world. So testing for headsets, for different phones, we may need to invest in actually having at least the most popular and most up-to-date versions of the platform, of the devices that we want to use. Apple and iOS computers have a slightly different OS. I won't get into the details of that, but and then we may still want to incorporate some iOS, some Unity assets. Just offhand, I can think now. We started talking about having a marketplace inside of virtual reality. I haven't got a chance to search around for ones that I think would be most compatible with this type of project, but especially one that's going to be up to date and work for all of the devices that we need. We may want to invest in Unity assets like the marketplace. Ones for if we don't want to have somebody come in and make our own proprietary 3D models, there's plenty on the asset store. Environments, lighting, shaders, what have you, everything. So that's something we definitely might want to look at as well. Timeline. Okay. Testing is going to take up the most of our time, obviously. because there's just so many different platforms that and versions, and each of those is specific, and each of those could potentially have a barrier for for our builds to actually be compatible. Just here I've listed just a few, um, but I mean, of each of the ones that I have listed, and next to these I have V, but essentially all of them could have different versions next to them, so I might update that. But um, Oculus, of course, we know there's the Quest One, Quest Two, but then um, there's the Rift, and we all know this. PlayStation, Android, Windows has, even within just Windows 10, there's dozens and dozens of different OS versions um, that you could essentially use. So testing is going to really, and depending, we may decide that we don't want to use that many platforms. We might just go Oculus Quest 2, like, the major Oculus Quest 2, HTC, Valve, and any of the Google Cardboard or Gear VR. And we could wash our hands of that for head-mounted displays, and then operating system we could just say Windows. And for platforms, of course, we could just use PC. But that's something that would definitely cut down on time, especially if we were just trying to get out a MVP, just like an alpha version of something that we can just get out super, super quick. But that's up to the discretion of the project manager. All right, let's see. All right, and then cost. Yeah, I explained this all before, but I just wanted to add a little bit of overlap. Hardware, software, and payroll, of course, are going to be the biggest expenses. We may come across some other things that we need to do for collaboration, like getting different what are they called? Getting different version control. I know me and Jose used the version control that was built for Unity, and that worked fantastic. But again, you may decide for the team for it to be, Unreal Engine or Godot, or people are collaborating using different, testing different versions of IDEs. But yeah, those are going to be our major expenses. I have some of the prices listed in the PDF that I'm going to update, but unfortunately, we can't really get around the testing expenses. We could do a little finagling with the positions and with the payroll and potentially even the hardware, especially tentatively as we start the project. But um, you know, these expenses are going to evolve as the project moves forward. So that's something that's going to be up to the discretion um, of management of the team. Now, given the fact that the project does have a short timeline, I don't think any of the numbers that are represented in the PDF are going to be set in stone by any standard of measurement. So yeah, that's something that we're going to have to discuss. So yeah, I was talking about player customization. Get back into Unity here. So here, the main scripts that we'll be able to use to affect the player customization. Actually, a few. But the one I want to focus on is the avatar set. Custom VR constraints and the. It's not here. Oh, well, we'll start with custom VR constraints. And I'll actually do this by starting this up so you can see the character and have an example of what I'm talking about as I do it. as you can see here, like before, I said that it's going to be hard to show VR. That's why I was using the mobile version, because I can use the handles in the screen, because the character is like super, super low. Because it actually uses your real world height for the project. But anyway, you can see in here, this is our character. Oops, wrong way. Come on. So slow. Okay. This is our character. And if we go into the character, all of these things can be changed of the character naturally. But there are certain scripts that belong to the character that can change the actual its actual functionality. And this was actually the script that I was looking for, the OBR player customization. So you can change the height, you can change the the rotation speed. There is a feature on here that I thought I checked off, which is the snap rotation. And oddly enough, the character is still snapping, which is kind of weird. But I'll look into that later. But looking at the script for that, we can also change all of these hardlined in code. And all of these parameters are directly linked to the character's geometry. And by that, I mean if we go into the actual character, pull that up here, this character can, it's really just drag and drop. The hands are separate from the rest of the geometry. This character is just rigged with a skeleton, and there are blend shapes applied probably through Blender or some other similar software to get it to work, but all of these can be swapped out. Really, and Jose is a whiz at this. I've done it a little bit, but he's the guy to go to for that. But yeah, it's just rigging a skeleton in something like Blender or like Autodesk or something like that, and then importing it in. We can swap those out super duper easy. And then through the customization through code, we can add different interactions for the characters to be able to communicate. Another good part about the customization of characters is that these all blend very, very nicely with the Unity assets that we're using. One of which is let's see if I can find it. They're both for Photon, but one is Photon Voice, and the other one is it's just the Unity Photon Communications repository. With that, you have to set up. I set up a separate account, and I could transfer these back over to whoever's on the team. But really, that allows for seamless communication, real-time communication between characters, both orally and through texting or messaging, which is really, really great. But you could also, I may not have shown this when I was doing the video presentation inside the project, but you can have hand tracking, different gestures can start different can trigger different functions within the game. So, and then interactions between characters, pointing at characters, pretty much anything that you see in VR chat was used using Unity's or Oculus's integration toolkit. So that's really cool. So I'll leave that there. If you have any more questions about that, I'd be happy to follow up. I'll try to add more in the documentation when I get to that. I just don't want to, throw too much out there right out the gate. But if you have any more questions about that, like characters, interactions, stuff like that, please let me know. It'll give me a lot of direction on where to start, focusing my research moving forward. But a lot of cool stuff that can be done there. Okay. So, and then there's the cross-platform aspect of it. So, what I want to start with is the upload file to server. As you can see here, I hope you can see here. I can zoom in a little bit. Um, all of the interactions with the PHP server, um, I've watched and read a ton of resources on it. As long as we set up the framework and integration for, the type of extension it is, whether it be OBJ or FBX, we're talking about 3D models um, or animation files, uh, or if we're dealing with, 2D images, PNG, JPEG, all of that is also built into the Oculus integration. So it should simply be a matter of swapping out, um, you know, the different methods and functions that are dedicated to handling those types of file transfer. There's going to be a little bit more of a workaround when we start, messing with 3D objects and animations because of the way that they'll be stored in memory. But for the most part, it's just a matter of making calls from the websites. And I forgot actually, Oculus has this new. They changed the API for pulling from HTTP, but yeah, it should be as simple as that. One of the things that I didn't get to test, I must have broken something, but again, we can start the whole thing from scratch and um, build it from the ground up using some of the prefabs that they have as part of the VR Share project that I'm using. But one of the things that we should be able to do is to actually host the files. So if I upload something to the server, I can make a call to the PHP server to query what's ever in the database, and it should be able to be shown. And with that, we can also have parameters where certain content's not shown. Certain content could be behind a paywall. Certain content could be hosted specifically to those who are part of certain groups or in certain locations. So it's very simple, very beautifully done in the project that the developer made. And it should prove to be very, very, very useful moving forward. There's a lot that can be done with the read and writes from the namespaces that they've created, and these scripts they've created. So we have that, and then yeah, especially the downloaded file. That it seems very, very interesting because these scripts that they have here, I mean, as soon as I get out, I'm going to test it. But it seems like you should just be able to change the file extensions and then have a dedicated folder on the PHP server to work with. But again, I don't want to bog it down too much, so I won't get into the weeds on that. So I guess that was super short and quick. Can't remember specifically what I mentioned this before, but yeah, all of the assets that are in the project are completely customizable. And I'll try to do, when I start messing around with uploading and downloading, I'll probably start with the marketplace first. But when I start with uploading, downloading different types of media, I'll try to incorporate some of the geometry that I used in older projects and just personal 3D stuff that I've made, so you can see an example of how intricate and the different options we can have for environments and interaction for our users. So I think that's it for now. Again, if you have any questions, I'm going to tag, or not tag, but I'll forward all the messages I've been having with the developers. I will update the PDF. I'll get to the Miro board, and the first thing I'll do, I'm going to try to test out the marketplace to see if we can get some transactions going in VR. So yeah, let me know what you think, what you think we still need, and I'll be more than happy to get onto it. All right, talk to you soon. Ciao.